Just a couple of things I want to pick up on from Jonas Eidevall's press conference on Friday ahead of the WSL game away at Leicester on Sunday. Not just from the press conference really, but bits and pieces of news that have and haven't been out over the last few days. And the first one I want to pick up on in the video is the decision for Arsenal, Jonas Eidevall, to rest Vivanne Miedema for the game this weekend. And of course, the Netherlands also haven't called her up for the international break. There's been a mutual agreement between Arsenal and Netherlands to give Viv a couple of weeks off. Now, we saw exactly that, I think exactly this time last year in the November international break. She was given a game off for Arsenal just before the international break. She was spared the international break, so she had a good kind of 3 weeks off and was able to go on holiday. And that's something that's going to happen again this season, because after Sunday's game against Leicester, there is a 2-week break for internationals. So this is becoming, I think, as I said to Jonas in the press conference there, I think a positive theme of his management. He's done this for Viv twice now at exactly the same time of year. We also know that last Christmas, I nearly sung that line, last Christmas he gave the Australian players extra time off so that they could go home and see their families, not least because of COVID. They hadn't been home in over 2 years, and he granted them extra time to be able to do that. And I think in both scenarios we saw a much better Vivanne Miedema in the second half of last season than we did in the first, although there was obviously a tactical change as well that I think was behind that, her moving out of the number 9 role and into the number 10 role. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video. But I think we also saw the benefit for Steph Catley and Caitlin Ford. Now, in the immediate term, Arsenal lost the game that they were kind of granted as leave, as it were, away at Birmingham, and that, in a material sense, cost Arsenal the league title. But in the kind of medium term, I think Caitlin and Steph have just been playing much better since having that time off, and correlation doesn't always equal causation, but I'm certain it's not a coincidence that they both really hit what I consider to be much closer to their top form after that. So, you know, this is a positive theme, I think, of Jonas's management. And I think in an ideal world, most managers would like to be able to do this. But when it comes down to it, jobs are on the line, you know, points are on the line. It's easier said than done. But Jonas clearly making, I guess, drawing a line in the sand and saying, no, this is something I'm going to do for my players. So he wasn't giving a lot away about Viv specifically, but I'll run the video now of me asking him the question about Vivanne Miedema. I wonder what kind of led to this decision and how much the form of Freedom Arnhem and Jordan Nobbs gives you the confidence to do this as well.
It's a good question. I prefer not to go into detail about it, but like I answered on the question before, I think it's the balance between short-term, long-term. It's the balance between what's best for the individual and what's best for the club. And in this situation, this was the best decision.
Now, of course, like I said, he wasn't giving a lot away about Viv's specific situation. We know she had COVID during the Euros. She missed 2 games and then was immediately played for 120 minutes upon returning. And again, as much as I don't think Mark Parsons had unwarranted criticism for doing that, but at the same time, I do think pretty much any other manager would have done that. It was a quarter-final of the Euros. Again, like I said, jobs were on the line. Netherlands lost that game and Mark Parsons lost his job. So as much as it's not ideal, I can see why managers do it. And that's why what Jonas is doing with some of these players and allowing them that kind of time off to refresh, like I said, it's easier said than done quite a lot of the time. In Viv's specific scenario as well, I don't know exactly how those conversations have gone. And like I said, Jonas, understandably and predictably, I think, wouldn't talk about it. But I don't think Viv does bad performances, but I don't think she's been at her best at the beginning of this season. I don't think she's been as good as she was at the end of last season. I'm sure that she would probably say that, maybe not as well. So, and also with the form of Freedom Arnhem, who kind of came into the team for that Lyon game and played so well and has been undroppable ever since. You got Jordan Nobbs coming in as well, who's, you know, scored twice in her last 2 games, and so she's difficult to ignore. And I'm sure that bears a little bit of a part in the decision that Jonas has thought, you know what, I've got 2 other players who play that position who are actually playing really well at the minute, and it's really difficult not to give them minutes, so I can afford to give Viv this time off at this point of the season. And remember, after the November international break, Arsenal have really, really big fixtures. They've got Juventus twice in the Champions League. They've got Lyon at home, Zurich away. So big Champions League fixtures. They play Manchester United as well. I think they have slightly harder games as well in the WSL, like Everton and Aston Villa away. Everton at home and Aston Villa away. So, you know, I think maybe a slightly different level of opponent to what Arsenal have had in the WSL in the first half of this half of the season. So I think it makes a lot of sense, to be honest. And I'm interested in what that does to the midfield, because we've seen since February, before that Lyon game, almost exclusively since February, we've seen that Volti, Little, Miedema midfield. Obviously, Frida Maanum's come in and disrupted that a bit with her good performances, and I think Jordan as well. And you know, Kim Little went off in the West Ham game with a knee injury. Again, well, look, I'll run the video at this point. I asked Jonas about Kim Little's injury, and this is what he said.
We're still in that process where we, unfortunately for you guys, have to be a little vague with our answer. Things are progressing with all three of them, even if Kim's is early on. As planned, the players and the medical team is doing a fantastic job. So they're really doing their best every day. And once we get a little bit closer for them to return to play, I hope we can provide an update.
So as per usual with Jonas, you don't really get specific timelines on injuries, but I don't think we'll see Kim before Christmas. And so Jordan Nobbs, I think, will get a run in that number 8 role. And I'm really pleased about that, because I think Jordan has deserved more minutes in that position than she's got. I think that's her best position, the number 8. I wrote an analysis article about this in the wake of the West Ham game. And I think the way I kind of summarise it, maybe a little bit reductively, is I think Kim Little was probably the best small space player in the world. You know, we all laugh about how she dribbles around players in short spaces, but that wasn't the challenge that West Ham were posing. West Ham were really boxing in Arsenal's right-hand side, and I think Jordan's one of the best big space players in the world, and it was a big space game, because West Ham, in boxing off that right-hand side, were leaving the left-hand side wide open, and Jordan is much better positioned, I think, to exploit that. And that's the thing about Jordan. I think Jordan's deserved more minutes, not because she's loyal and because she's long-serving, but because she's good, and she has these qualities that I think Arsenal and England could and should use more. And I think with Kim, I think Kim's going to be out for, you know, like I said, I very much doubt we'll see her before the new year. And I think that's going to give Jordan a run in the team. And so, you know, once Viv comes back, you've got Jordan and Frida for that number 8 role. I'm very happy about the quality of those two players. You can play Jordan and Frida together in the 8 and the 10. You can play them as two aggressive attacking 8s, which is, I kind of think, what Arsenal will do, more or less. And I'm quite excited to see that midfield, to be honest. I think it's got a lot of potential. I guess my worry, you know, you lose a player like Kim Little, obviously that's a blow. That's a really, really big blow. I do think we've got the players to cover it, but more, I think my concern is just the squad getting a bit smaller. Those players are going to have to play all of the games. I'm not sure whether we'll see Leah Williamson before New Year. I think we might see Rafaelle. I think she might come back a little bit earlier. I don't know that for 100% sure, but that's the vibe I get. So I think we might see Rafaelle before Christmas. I'm not certain we'll see Leah. So again, that's you know, through the spine of the team, Arsenal have effectively lost their spine quite quickly. Leah, Hafa, Kim Little, Viv. You know, there's a lot gone on there. But I'm comfortable with the quality of the players coming in. It's just more that just takes away the chance to rotate a little bit, because we're losing players. So those players who are coming in are all really strong players, and I'm really enthusiastic about seeing them. But we're going to have to see them all the time. And really, I think it's difficult to imagine that won't have some impact on Arsenal. Fingers crossed it won't be on results, but maybe on performances. There might be some games where Arsenal won't be at their absolute tip-top best, and they might have to manage this situation a little bit. But I do think it's a positive thing to give Viv time off. I do think we can afford to do that at this moment in time with the players we've got, and hopefully she'll come back much fresher like she did last year, I think. But yeah, with some of the games we got in December in particular, and that winter break is shorter this year because of the Champions League, I think, things might get challenging in mid to late December.